Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our fourth virtual workshop of the year. We're pleased to provide election information directly to you, our Maricopa County voters. My name is Betty Galanter, and I am the Voter Outreach Manager for Maricopa County elections. So what do we have for you today? Well, our topics today include how vote centers are determined and how to get involved in elections as a poll or election worker. Here's our agenda. We're going to start with our Elections Director, Scott Jarrett, who will share how Maricopa County Elections uses data to determine the number of vote centers and their distribution throughout the county for elections, so we can serve our in-person voters, whether they're voting in person early or on election day. Then you're going to meet our premier poll and election worker veteran who has participated in serving Maricopa County elections for over 20 years. She's going to share the different types of poll worker positions available and the roles and responsibilities. Next, I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is to apply for a position on our website, getinvolved.maricopa.vote. Then we're going to move into a live Q&A session and answer the questions you submit. The panel includes Scott and Anita, our recruitment manager, and will be moderated by our Deputy Elections Director over Communications, Jennifer Lewer. Now, to submit your questions, it's simple. Just type it out on your type out your question below the live video image and then click submit. We're going to try to answer as many questions as our time allows this morning, but all of your questions will be answered for viewing once we upload this video on our site. You'll find this video and others by going to youtube.com/maricopavote. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up. But first, let me introduce Scott Jarrett, our host for today. Now, Scott's been with Maricopa County Elections, a department of the Board of Supervisors, for over 4 years, and he currently serves as the election director responsible for directing all in-person voting, tabulation operations, candidate filing, campaign finance, and warehouse operations. And Scott works closely with the Maricopa County Recorder, Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and he reports to the Maricopa County Manager. And we do want to take some time to thank our special guest today. Jennifer Lewer is Deputy Elections Director for Communications, and Jennifer is an Arizona native who has worked in public sector communications and media relations for nearly 25 years in the greater Phoenix area. She's served at all levels of government, including city, state, school district, and county. Jennifer recently joined our team here at Maricopa County Elections as a Deputy Elections Director for Communications, and we are really thrilled to have her. Anita Esquivel is the Recruitment Manager for Maricopa County Elections, and Anita's been with the county for a little over 3.5 years with the Elections Recruitment Team. Now, Anita oversees the recruitment efforts for permanent staff, early voting and tabulation, warehouse, and poll worker positions. And in addition to her experience with the county, she was a branch manager with LGC Staffing and graduated from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas, with a Bachelor's of Science degree in criminal justice. And Joanne, she is our star poll and election worker and began as a poll worker in 2000. Since then, she's been promoted, runs the hotline in our command center during elections. She is invaluable to us. She's a great resource, and we are very lucky to have her. So a few reminders before we begin. This presentation is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube for future viewing at youtube.com/maricopavote. Now you can submit your questions anytime. Captioning is provided today by Tracy, and we have 2 American Sign Language interpreters, Amy and Yvonne. So welcome, Tracy, Amy, and Yvonne. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Scott.
Well, thank you, Betty, and thank you for turning into our 4th virtual workshop of 2023. So we first started with bringing you into our ballot tabulation center, where we talked about all the layers of controls and checks and balances that we have through the tabulation process. We went inside and visited one of our vote centers to demonstrate the voting process. We also talked through and visited one of our great partners, Ability 360, to talk about some of the accessible voting options that voters with disabilities would have to be able to participate in the voting process. Today, we're going to be talking and providing information on how we determine where to place voting locations and vote centers, and also talking through some of the roles that serve in a voting location, our poll workers, and how to get involved. So right now, we'll talk about some of those decisions we make related to voting locations and vote centers. But it's first a concept of what is a vote center. So prior to 2020, Maricopa County used to use precinct-based voting. So, and that is when voters are assigned one voting location on election day to be able to participate and vote. And nationally, including in the state of Arizona and Maricopa County, one of the biggest complaints in-person voters have is being in the wrong location. And the vote center models actually solve that issue, because with the vote center model, voters can vote at any one of our voting locations, whether that's early voting or on election day. And another issue that vote centers solve is, not completely, but almost entirely, is provisional ballots. So back in the 2000s and even in the teens in the 2000s, we used to have over 100,000 provisional ballots, because that is voters going to the wrong voting location. So the vote center solved that, and that actually even helps us speed up our counting process, because we no longer need to do all that research related to whether that provisional ballot should count or not, because we're able to give that ballot, those voters, the correct ballot. So over my shoulder here, we have some maps on our walls. So when we're making decisions about our vote centers, we use data-driven decisions. What I mean by that is, in this instance, we're seeing the different stages or the different days of early voting and the progression of when voters are participating in the early voting process. So we can use this data to help us decide when we want to open up our voting locations and how many. So state law says we can first open our in-person voting locations 27 days before election day. So in 2022, based off this data, we opened 12 vote centers. And then about 2 weeks before election day, we had over 50 vote centers available for voters to choose. Then the day before election day, we had 128 vote centers, and on election day itself, we had 223. So for this upcoming 2024 voting cycle, we'll have a very similar amount of numbers, and we'll use maps like this that help us make those decisions. And specifically, right, so this is going to be that 27th day of early voting, and you can see all these red dots that show how many in-person voters voted that day in 2020, and you can see the vote centers that were open at that point in time. And you can see the progression as we go through the election cycle, how many voters are participating. And then you can also look down this portion of the data, and this is called a histogram. Essentially, it's just describing how many voters in total voted each of those days during early voting. And I mentioned at 27 days before election day, we open up our vote centers, but about that 2-week period is when we open up weekend voting and evening voting. And that's all based off the information we've gathered from maps like these. Now I'm going to take you to another map, and this is what we call a heat map. So the heat maps, and we have 3 on these walls. This one right here is a Republican in-person voting from 2020. We have the Democratic in-person voting from 2020, and then the combined, all voters. So one of the questions we get, why do we have one for just party specific? And the reason we do that is because there are some elections, like a presidential preference election, when there may only be one party participating. For 2024, we're in September 2023 currently, and we found out that both the Republicans and the Democrats are going to participate. So it would be more focused on this purple voting map, which shows all different voters. But the information that this is giving us is just looking back at historical information on how many in-person voters and where they live and if they participated on election day. So that's one data point that we use to make those decisions. And essentially, if you look at this map, you can see here's loop 303, right? So an outer loop. We also have loop 202 here in the far East Valley. So if all within these outer loops, the urban areas of Maricopa County, our vote centers are placed about every 1 to 2 miles. But we also have to be considerate of those voters that live in the less populated areas of Maricopa County. So that might be Aguila, that could be Gila Bend, that even could be some of our Native American communities, such as the Tohono O'odham Nation. So there is, for the Tohono O'odham Nation, we have to go down to a place called Gaka Village. That requires us to drive actually into Pinal County, through Casa Grande, and around some mountains that are south of Maricopa County. So it's a little over a 3-hour drive for us to get there. We have to have our team that's going to be working that voting location stay the night in Casa Grande so they can get there very, very early in the morning to open on election day. And there might only be a handful of voters that participate at that voting location, but we don't want those voters to have to drive that 3 hours to get to their closest voting location. So we make sure we place a voting location in those rural communities as well. And other things that we will add to our maps are we'll put overlays of all the freeways, our bus lines, and even light rail. So we're making sure that we have voting locations close to public transportation to serve those voters if they don't have a vehicle of their own to be able to drive. So these are just some of the vast amount of information we're using to make informed decisions on where to place those voting locations. So the next part of our workshop is we're going to go actually into a vote center here at the tabulation center and meet one of our long-term hotline leads, Joanne, and she's going to walk us through each of the different roles those poll workers will play in the voting location. So if you follow me. Well, hello, Joanne.
Hi, Scott.
Thank you for joining us today.
You bet.
So Joanne's going to be talking to us about the roles the poll workers play in the voting location. So you've been with the Elections Department for how long?
Since 2000.
So over 20 years.
That's correct.
Wow, that's a lot of service that you've provided to Maricopa County voters. So what role have you played within the Elections Department?
The role I'm playing now is I work at the command center, answering the hotline. But I started working as a poll worker when my kids were in grade school.
As a poll worker, so then you've been promoted up to answer questions from poll workers at our hotline.
That's correct.
So our poll workers will call into our hotline if they have a question about a statute or if they have a technical issue that they need assistance. So you're going to walk us through and introduce us to the positions for those poll workers in each of our voting locations. So thank you.
You're welcome. The first person I'm going to introduce to you who works in the vote center is the marshal. The marshal is in charge of all signage in the vote center, inside and outside. They put the signs on the outside. They put the 75-foot limit signs. They also are the person who monitors the curbside voting. They're the ones who monitor the 75-foot limit to make sure that electioneers are on the outside so voters can come into the vote center. The next person I'm going to show you is the inspector. The inspector is basically the boss of the poll workers. They're the ones who make sure all the poll workers understand their positions, what they're supposed to do, and assign them their duties. The inspector or a judge is the first person you're going to see in the vote center right by the site books where you sign in. The two judges are the inspector's backup. They assist the inspector in all their duties. They also know all the procedures for signing in to the site books. Then they will assist the voters in going over to the voting booth, filling out their ballots, putting them in the envelopes, and showing them where to drop them off at the drop box. The next person that I'm going to introduce you to is the clerk. The clerk is the one who oversees the BODs, the ballot on demand printers. This is where our envelopes, our paperwork, and our ballot come out once the voter has checked into our site books. The clerk will then make sure that they give the correct ballot to the voter, and then will ask them to go over to the voting booths, fill out their ballots, and then to put the ballots envelopes into the vote box. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Scott.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Before you hand it back over to me, so we started and you mentioned that you have served as a poll worker before. So we talked about the marshal, the inspector, the judges, and the clerks. So what was your favorite position?
Well, my favorite position, and I've done most of them except for being an inspector, because the inspector is in charge of the vote centers, and that's kind of not like my thing. But my favorite position is being a marshal. I used to be a flight attendant. I'm retired. And as you know, flight attendants like to tell people what to do.
So the marshals tell the people what to do.
That's correct.
Well, they're really assisting them as they're entering the voting locations. But they also announce what? What are the
opening and closing procedures.
So
Sorry.
no, but the opening and the closing.
Opening and closing of the vote center.
So when you do that, what do you go out to the outside?
Go outside and you get to yell, "The vote center will close in 5 minutes."
And then when we get to 1 minute, you do it again.
Same again, and then my favorite part is the vote center is now closed.
That's right. So, and that'll be after 7 p.m. on election
Yes,
day.
sir.
Well, what if voters are still in line at that point?
That's the marshal's job to be, if there's a line at 7 p.m., they stand at the back of the line to make sure no one else gets in line behind them.
And sometimes that's a little bit of a difficult conversation,
Yes,
right?
it
Because
is.
they may be entering the line right at 7:01, but the state law requires that the voters have to be in line at 7
7
o'clock.
p.m., that's correct.
So one of the things that we've been doing for our poll workers is training them on having some of those difficult conversations.
That's correct, and that's kind of my favorite part.
Yeah, so being able to really explain the laws to the voters so they have an understanding of why, about the voting processes. But if they have any questions about the voting process.
Correct.
Well, Joanne, I want to thank you for coming in here and explaining the role of each of our different poll workers. Our poll workers are community members, they're family members, they're your neighbors, and they're here to serve voters, but also help Maricopa County administer elections. So I want to thank you for going through this part of the virtual workshop. Now I'm going to turn it back to Betty, and then we're going to be answering some of your questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott and Joanne. And we hope you would enjoy knowing more about the different roles of a poll worker. Now, for those of you interested in becoming a poll or election worker, the requirements include that you must be at least 18 years old and be a registered voter in Arizona. Of course, being bilingual is a plus, as is a deep desire to assist our voters. Now that you know more about the different roles and requirements to get involved, let's look at a quick tutorial that'll show you how easy it is to find more information about getting involved and how to apply.
From your browser, simply type in getinvolved.maricopa.vote. Once there, you can view poll worker opportunities or other election job openings. Let's say you're interested in becoming a temporary poll worker. Then click on Become a Poll Worker. From there, you will see different positions available as a poll worker. There are 6 positions with different roles and responsibilities. On average, we hire approximately 10 poll workers per vote center. And in 2024, we'll have hundreds of vote centers with 27-day, 12-day, 2-day, and election day only sites. To learn more about a position, just click on the position to read a brief description of the roles and responsibilities of each, such as inspector, judge, marshal, or troubleshooter. Scroll further down the page to read about the pay and schedule, requirements, skills, and working conditions. Once you decide which poll worker role you're interested in, and even if you're not sure which role you're interested in, click the Submit Your Interest button. From there, you will be prompted to enter your contact information. Now, please make sure to provide information in all the required fields, which are noted with the red asterisk. Next, click on the job or jobs you are interested in. You may choose more than one. When you're ready to submit your interest, click on the Submit button. That begins the process with our recruitment team, who will then reach out to you. Once hired, and according to state law, training will begin up to 45 days prior to Election Day. This paid training is designed to give you all the information and confidence to be successful in your role. Now, let's say you're interested in becoming an election worker instead. Scroll back to the top of the page and click on Other Election Job Openings. As with the Poll Worker tab, scroll to each tab to find out more about each position, which include opportunities working in early voting and tabulation, the warehouse, or the call center. In early voting and tabulation, we have 8 different positions. Click on each position to learn more about the role, the job duties, and the working conditions. The warehouse offers 4 different positions, including ballot courier, warehouse driver, warehouse worker, and T-Tech. And in the call center, this is where we provide assistance to voters on the phone. Once you determine which position you are interested in, click Submit Your Interest. From there, you'll be prompted to enter your contact information. Please enter all the information, then click on the position you're interested in and click Submit. It is as easy as that.
Well, we hope that this Get Involved tutorial was helpful to you. But I want to mention that we also have opportunities for high school students of at least 16 years of age to get involved as a paid election clerk at a vote center on Election Day. This provides students leadership and job skills, and it looks good on a resume. Plus, students get paid for their efforts, including for the training. And we do rely on our community to help us conduct elections for the over 2.5 million registered voters in our county. So we sure hope that you join us. Being a poll or election worker will allow you to gain a better understanding of how elections are run in the county, fulfill your civic duty, and get paid for it. So please apply today. Well, now it's time for our Q&A session with Scott Jarrett and Anita Esquivel, moderated by Jennifer Lewer. Jennifer?
Thank you so much, Betty. First question. How do you begin and when do you begin hiring for each election?
So we typically start 3 months in advance from the election day, and we work with our supervisors and managers over each area to establish what numbers in regards to positions that they need us to fill.
Great. And we learned a little bit about a vote center earlier. What types of positions do we actively recruit for in the elections?
We'll have positions, the inspector of the voting locations, that's the supervisor. We have 2 judges. So no, those 2 judges actually can be appointed by the county chairs for the political parties. And then we have a marshal at the voting location. And then we have clerks that serve in a variety of capacities at our voting locations. But one thing that people don't realize is we have a lot of workers that support the election here at our central counting facility. And so they'll be starting several weeks before we start opening those early voting locations all the way through Election Day. And then we need, probably one of the most difficult positions we hire is for our drivers. And for every truck, we'll have 2 different drivers that are assisting us with delivering all of that equipment out to the voting locations. And we usually hire anywhere from 40 to 60 drivers.
And what kind of hours can people expect when they do become a temporary worker?
When we are going through the recruitment process, we try to inform everybody that it is a Monday through Friday position with full-time hours. And the longest day is definitely for our poll workers who are going to be at the polling locations from 5:30 and ranging to about 9 o'clock.
So 5:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Wow, that is a really long day.
Definitely is, but you get to do your, you get to participate within the election and definitely do your part to make our goal be reached.
Yeah.
And it's a very rewarding experience. So you're working alongside members of your community, so that whether that's your neighbors, individuals that you're involved in with nonprofits, maybe even your church, all coming out to support the elections. It can be a long day, but it's that experience that coming out to serve democracy, serve Maricopa County voters.
Well, 2024 is going to be a big year. We have the presidential preference election in March. We have a primary election in August, and we will have a general election in November. Do we know yet how many poll workers we're going to need? You touched a little bit on last year, but Anita, what is your team planning for?
So we will definitely be looking at previous elections and establishing those numbers, but at this time, we're going through our plan and we're going to be working through that diligently.
And we have data analysts out there looking at historical elections that might be similar to really drive how many voters we think will participate. And then Anita's team, with Anita, she has a few full-time recruiters here on site, and then we have a few full-time poll worker recruiters, but we also need additional temporary recruiters to assist.
Tell us a little bit about how we prepare people.
Yeah, so poll workers, they come out and perform a very important role, and there's a lot of state laws that they have to follow, and federal laws, and the specific procedures we need them to be aware of at the voting location, just for those Maricopa County voters as well. So all of our inspectors and our judges that we're now rolling out, we have a premium poll worker training course. So that's a 2-day course, 16 hours, lots of knowledge checks throughout. We train those poll workers on not only what they need to know and what would go well, but if something maybe doesn't go according to plan, how do they respond to that issue? We provide them training on customer service and de-escalation techniques as well.
Well, Anita, your team has a lot to do in the next few months and in the next year. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
Scott, thank you for your time today. Thank you for talking about all the data that goes into where we locate our voting locations, as well as how we recruit people to participate. And so with that, I'm going to toss it back to Betty. Thank you so much for your time today, Betty.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Scott and Anita, and thank you, viewers, for submitting all of those wonderful questions. Well, that is really all the time we have today. We hope you found our time together beneficial. Remember, you can view this and any of our previous virtual workshops by going to youtube.com/Maricopa Vote. There you're going to find all of our workshops, our 10-minute election connection video shorts hosted by Scott and Ray, and a variety of 2-minute election topics hosted by our very own mascot, Phil the Ballot. And remember, if you want to stay informed, go to our website, elections.maricopa.gov, and subscribe to our monthly newsletter, Just the Facts, by going to justthefacts.vote. Last, I encourage you to go to ballot-ready.vote, where you can view your personalized voter dashboard. It really is your one-stop shop for all things elections. So please do go to ballot-ready.vote. It'll help you to prepare for the upcoming elections and provide you all the information that you need. And last, we will like to hear from you. So we're going to ask that you please take a moment to fill out the online survey card that I'm going to send you. Let us know how we're doing. And join us next time when we will discuss the presidential preference election and how you can participate. Thanks to Scott, Jennifer, Anita, and Joanne, our interpreters, and all of our election team members behind the scenes that made this workshop possible. So from all of us at the Maricopa County Elections, thank you for attending and have a great day.